Have today because several new boys have come, so they asked me to communicate something related to the general program that I am doing here, and then maybe perhaps as it was announced to you, one of our old students would be interacting with you. I thought maybe you'd be more interested in listening to the topper, because success always has a louder voice than whatever. But then I always say this, to teach for a UPSC, there should always be a qualification to be a teacher, that is failure at UPSC. To tell to the students how not to fail in the exam. That was the endeavor into which we had been there all the way along. So there are two things that I wanted to present to you today. And along with that, as the general trend goes on, I will be interested in sharing some stories, as we all know. And a couple of cautions that I wanted to give you. Though I have said this in one of my classes earlier, it is always dangerous to have more than one masters in mind. See to it that you depend on one. It is not simply, I am talking about a human teacher for that matter. I am talking about something else here, because one of the students, where are you? Krishna. Yeah. He ate up my night's sleep yesterday by his very heartfelt, painful letters that he had written. I always love receiving love letters. So when he was writing with so much of pain, that I am confused between what I am learning in some other paper, some other subject, and what I am learning here. That's the second thing that I wanted to say here. What you might be writing in certain other paper may be of a different spirit and chemistry when it comes to writing in this particular subject. So do not get confused. See, what might be desirable in that particular paper, you try to do justice there. And what is right here, what you are supposed to do here in order to get marks here, because at the end of the day it is the marks. So when you think that there's a confusion between what I have learned there, maybe in the ethics paper I must have learned dharma in some other way, and what we are teaching about dharma here, you'll have to understand that dharma is a time specific thing, group specific, individual specific. So now the something else that the boy had added to me is, it is discipline specific also. So what is dharma there might be different from what is dharma here. So do not try to mix up things and khichdi banao and then get confused. Don't do that. Try to see to it that what we said is right here, you follow that here, and don't try to mix up. And whatever questions are there, I'll sit across and I would, because I think in tomorrow's class I will address his questions. Very beautifully written actually. At the end of the day, at the end of the letter, ప్రశ్న ఏది ఇందులో అన్నట్టుగా అనిపించింది, but then I understand that there's a confusion there. We will try to resolve that confusion. Second thing is, two programs that I wanted to talk about. Several boys have come to understand what we are going to do in the so-called mentorship program. And the second one is what the regular class program that I am aiming to do for you. Sir, one popular misconception that I wanted to deal with here is the optional subjects in general, and maybe perhaps anthropology in particular, is a static subject. That has been a very popular misconception people had been having. Because, see, if somebody who is superficially studying the subject, maybe from outside, if he is seeing, it might seem to be the same for him. See, when it comes to a basic concept, concepts may remain the same. Plus, year after year we see new concepts coming up into the discipline. So when I'm saying that there is a vibrant thing there, where there is a dynamism involved in the subject, what I mean is, number one, how the same existing concepts are being understood differently across the time. And second thing is, see, when we try to predict questions for the upcoming exams, we try to do it from what is academically happening in the discipline. In the academics, what happens is they try to interpret the same concept from a different perspective based on anything that might be emerging in the global and national level. Second thing is new concepts that are being added. Thirdly, for the same kind of a conceptual understanding, from time to time when new research works are being added, see, when so many universities are there globally, they are not sitting idle. They have been adding newer things. So my idea is a student who is getting trained now in same kind of an information and explanation base, say, somebody in 2 years ago or 1 year ago might be having. If that is the case, see, the problem with me is I get bored with the same kind of things. That's my personal problem, of course. I cannot teach the same thing. Suppose I have taught you something in today's class. If I have to deliver the same lecture tomorrow, technically I won't be doing the same thing tomorrow also, because it looks to be weird that I'm delivering the same thing. So there should be some kind of a value addition. If not anything else, something must have happened in the newspaper today. I should be based on that. So I'm not like, I write those 10 points for this topic and do the 10 points religiously the next 30 years. I don't believe in that. So at my personal level, I try to learn and improve from the student's perspective. Year after year, when journals are publishing newer examples and new things, it becomes my responsibility to train you in the new things that I am adding. That's where I have to tell you that this is not a very static subject when it comes to examples, references, and case studies. And that is also a reason why we see that, suppose somebody had studied the subject a couple of years ago and has been writing the exam, and somebody who has written the exam from the latest information, I am really sure the fellow with the latest information will be able to get more marks. That is the reason why if somebody has taken a guidance program now, it depends on the relationship that you have with the subject, with the teacher, in enhancing the content. So we give you the tips of how to enhance your content and how to keep you abreast with what is changing from year to year. That's where I think a hand-holding becomes necessary. And that's where I was actually talking about this mentoring thing. We try to handhold the students so that we try to give them that quantity enhancement thing. Because, I came here into the class, if I don't say something from the core of the subject, I feel unhappy. So when I was walking into the class, he was asking, can you be there for half hour? Half hour flies off just like that. No? We don't do things in half hours. We do things in feature film style. So, but then I said, no, I'll try to minimize myself, because the other speaker also is there. Generally it happens in the public meetings when you go, when we are given the mic, the entire program gets delayed because we want to say out whatever is there inside. No? I try to limit myself to one case study, because the new fellows who had come or the people who have already written the exam earlier, they are looking for something new to come. Sir, in your syllabus, there is one concept that has been considered very complex. The one that is seen as something that has very less material. That is in the last part of your syllabus in paper 2, we call it nationalism. How nationalism has been studied in anthropology. I'll give you one very interesting reference there. And what is contemporarily going on, if case studies is something that you are looking for. One idea, one kind of a topic or question or a concept that I am looking for in 2018 exam is not simply in terms of nationalism. I am looking at something like, the problems of Aboriginals, a comparison of India and outside. Question of this kind was asked earlier. Creation of a nation in India, compare with African nations. That was a question that was asked. I wanted to share a very personal experience with you. Very personal experience. Last year by this time, I was applying for a sponsored program for a field work. Because when we are studying the discipline such as anthropology, we study certain things in the books. My idea is that an anthropologist cannot claim to be an anthropologist if you do not have a field work. There are certain very huge popular myths that are being broken in the discipline in the last few years. So when I was trying to look for a program there, I was shortlisted among several others. So I was selected to study some of the Australian Aboriginal groups. I came to a very insightful conclusion. Though we hear this statement many times from the people and read in the books that seeing is believing, what you see, it communicates much more than what you actually read from the books. When you're reading from the books, maybe the book must have been written some decades ago, or the book must have been written keeping in view somebody's mind. What you perceive you are writing, what I go to the field, I may find it very drastically different from what is written there. Those of you who have studied the discipline or have some exposure to the discipline, you already know that one of the earliest studies or the regions that had inspired the earliest anthropologists was Australian Aboriginal studies. And people tried to create such a huge volume of information in the 1930s and 40s about the Aboriginal groups. By the way they have described the kind of the primitive eroticism, primitive beauty of the society. See, for anthropologists, when we say primitive, it actually enthuses us, it excites us. We would actually want to be there. But then when I had gone there with all those kind of ideas and myths that were imprinted from so many books, my image of the Aboriginals there had totally shattered. And I could not reconcile from what I have studied and how such a huge mismatch there. Two principal groups that I was studying actually, out of more than 500 tribal communities living there. And the first thing that struck me was that they don't consider Australia as a nation. And that's where I found that this can be a direct question, an example that I can give to the student for the exam. How the concept of nation and nationalism is conceived in India when compared to people outside. At least when it comes to Africa, people try to divide into certain nations, and they said that, see, you fellows, you ethnic groups can be belonging to this particular country within the continent. Now here what is happening is the entire continent you brand it as a nation. But then here the issue is those groups, 500 odd groups, they don't consider Australia as their nation. And they think that they have actually 500 different nations in the country, in the continent. So even when they talk to people, even when they interact with the others, they say that, see, this is what is our practice in our country. Now here, I wanted to actually bring to you something more interesting. That there is the other myth that I was trying to deal with. Most of the time we believe that the British stand for justice and kind of things. That was how Congress also viewed it at the British. We were not really happy when British was going. It was like, we were being abandoned, and maybe because we were being orphaned suddenly, all of a sudden, and we will be talking about this problem solving. Many times we don't want the problem to go. Problem becomes our mother. So we were so very getting attached at every level, maybe at a familial level, at an individual level, psychological level, and then maybe economic level. At every level we were getting attached to our own master. But what I found there is that in many of our history books and many of our anthropology books we read this, that the British had governed us, but the kind of governance was mostly in tune with the economic benefit rather than touching the core of the tribal culture. They were not instrumental so much in killing or eliminating tribal cultures. Rather than, their focus was on building maybe their economy and to some extent maybe strengthening their political system. Their intervention into the tribal heartland of cultures was very minimal. This is what mostly we study in anthropology of India. But when it comes to anthropology there, I found several groups working, talking about propagating what their culture is. The very painful thing is that they try to do it in a very silent way because the word Aboriginal seems to be an abuse. The beauty of Indian Constitution is that we have several provisions for our scheduled tribes, but the Constitution there has no mention of the protection of Aboriginals. We here recognize the downtrodden. There, the downtrodden, the native, the Aboriginal is not taken into account at all. And the northern part of the continent is much more gruesome because they are currently being dragged into the mainstream, the utter poverty in which they live. So if at all we talk about the human rights, I think we can boast of the human rights being maintained in our country when compared to a continent country like that. So far, whenever we were writing on nationalism, etc., I was actually trying to take a backseat on Indian nationalism. But then when I had seen on the field, I thought that maybe we are trying to do much more than, in a much better way than what was happening there. Because there, the British had almost eliminated the cultures. They were leading them to ethnocides, killing of cultures. So what the culture we see there today is either American culture or a British culture. The native culture hardly exists. And there are no documents in which the cultures are actually written. And I was meeting one warrior family, the warrior family of early 1900s, who had actually fought the British. The lady there, the the offspring, she was mentioning this because she saw her father, her grandfather fighting and dying the British, in the war with the British. So what she was saying was that we don't have our own past records. The beauty of India is we glorify our past, we write our past records. And interestingly, we already had an intellectual group here. We had the intelligentsia, we had the cultural practice of writing our past. And when the British came, we added to their practice. We in a way influenced them to write down the past of us, the history of us. What is happening there is the indigenous groups, the Aboriginal groups, they don't have their own cultural past being recorded. It's only by word of mouth something was happening. But then when the Europeans came, they started writing history, and the history that the Aboriginals know today is the history written by the white fellow. I hope you are following what I am saying. So in a way, something like an ethnocide, killing of culture happening in the 20th and 21st century, and nobody raising a voice there. And even if a voice is raised, they know how to cut the voices. When I was trying to take a claim of the video, I thought that maybe I would video record this particular thing. She says that I would talk to you, keep the video aside. And then she was so much into tears when she was describing the way the families were actually separated by the British master, so that, children are grown somewhere else, parents are there somewhere else. There is no enculturation process. It looks so very painful if you are hearing it for the first time. When I'm introducing all this, I actually want to dedicate at least a couple of classes to the case studies that we have generated there, to see how the tribal languages they are now trying to conserve. So you have this topic, linguistic anthropology. There are certain Italians there, some French people there trying to work on the native Australian languages, and they are trying to codify them, give scripts to them, something which they are doing against the will of the existing masters there. So what is happening there is much more interesting, much more painful than what we see here. Aboriginals are never an election issue there. But here, scheduled tribe is an election issue. Scheduled caste is an election issue here. Without them, you cannot think of winning the election. But there, you don't talk about them. Only thing is that it is a mandatory for them to vote. If they are not voting, there are punishments. So you will have to. So, but then when you showcase on the media, you say that, see, we have 100% voting. How you are making it possible that the 100% are voting is not advertised. In that sense, whatever 60%, 50% that we are voting is from the will of the people we are voting. I think we are much more democratic. Democracy is not simply voting. How you are actually brought to the voting booth, that also matters. So I think here, I can proudly say that we are Indians in this particular sense. There might be gray areas, there may be pit holes and manholes everywhere, but then we are actually, through the process of enculturation, are learning to actually pass through all those pit holes and manholes, trying to conserve ourselves. In spite of all these odds, we are trying to conserve our own culture. That's one of the things there. Don't worry much. Nationalism, those problems would remain. We would, for the exam's sake, try to tell you how to deal with them. Regionalism is one other beautiful area that we are going to deal with. Now coming to the mentoring kind of a thing here, I'll put it this way. This is for two kinds of people. Of course, there are full lot of people here who may be the first timers. There are a few people who have done the exam earlier and then exam has cheated them somewhere, or they could not address the exam properly and they could not understand the chemistry of the exam. It is for them. Or maybe there could be some students who studied with me earlier who would want to continue with this journey with some kind of a help. Wherein my idea is that there may be some souls who are disillusioned because failure thrashes you very badly. And when somebody is getting 340, 350, 330s, etc., and you are not getting so much, sometimes what happens is the graph constantly goes down. The graph constantly goes down and your morale is taking a beating there. Bouncing back becomes very important. One primary thing I'm trying to focus on here is I'm dividing the syllabus into related areas. I would be starting there with the theory part, that is theory of Indian society, theory of anthropology in general. And then we have one segment dedicated to archaeological work, one segment dedicated to physical anthropological work. So we divide the content into certain broader areas and we try to work on them. This is number one in general. Second and more important thing is, generally People come with this belief that, see, there are certain questions that are scoring, there are certain questions that are not. And we also, when we generally say out things, we say that, see, you try to attempt more from here, less from here, kind of a thing. That is for a general understanding. But that trick may not pay well for everybody. So what I would try to be doing there is, see, somebody has an expertise in some field, one particular field. In section 1, in one particular field, you are an expert there. Cultural and biological evolution, you are well versed with, archaeological thing. It sounds to be much more logical when I say that you try to attempt more questions from there, rather than I try to give something like a same pill for everybody. Same pill for everybody, that, see, you will have to attempt this particular question. It's not that way. Based on where you are good at, I should be able to recommend to you, see, these are the questions that suit you better. So it is something like a tailor-made thing, for individual student. It's not that, if that is the case, everybody would be writing the same answers in the exam. And where is the motivation there? And then we would also be working on special skills of the students. For example, somebody is too very good in one particular type of picture making. We try to put him across generating more pictures of that variety for this thing. And then people, when they ask me one general question, should we write in points, should we write in paragraphs, etc., which one would pay well? There is also no specific rule, something like that. At the end of the day, examiners should understand what you are trying to communicate. Either you are communicating pictorially, point-wise, or essay fashion. So based on the student's strength, we would try to prescribe what is. So the bottom line here is, in the mentorship program, I try to look at the skills and weaknesses of the individual student, and we try to do it. Secondly, for the souls that were gone missing in the last couple of years because of the kind of disillusionment, we would try to strengthen with the new content that we are trying to add from various journals or whatever kind of. So one is the content that I would be adding for them. I always say this, the old students, they know this. I always use this quotation that once a student, always a student, and once in contact, always in contact. So it's that, if you have done your course this year, it doesn't mean that on, say, 29th of September or 15th of October, I am closing the gate for you. It doesn't mean that after that I don't know you. Sometimes what happens is, things take time. For some people, the exam might click in one attempt. For some people, it may take time. That's where your patience is tested. It's not patience, the exam actually teaches us to be shameless. Shame can be taken with a lot of confidence there. Facing the shame and failure is something that the exam teaches us. Because, as I always say this, the moment you start writing the exam, when your family is announcing to the entire world that, see, my lord is writing this exam, suppose you have given the prelim, you couldn't make through the prelim. People have inquired, and yourself, your family, with a lot of humiliation, have said, communicated, that, see, the student did not clear the exam this year. After the mains, he will once again make a call. Prelim you have failed. He has to understand that you won't write the main exam. Mains result hai, kya hua mains? Mains bhi ho gaye. And then interview has come. After the interview also you get a call. God forbidden, with the same name of yours, somebody had cleared the exam, he might call and congratulate you. Adding oil to fire. So once you have failed, it is like, once you are raped, again and again you are being raped there. Every stage they are calling and reminding you of your failure. And there cannot be more shamefulness than that. And the exam teaches you. If at all everybody could get in the first attempt, UPSC will not give you so many attempts. And I am not saying that just because they are giving attempts, you have to use them. It's not that way also. No, kind of. So, sir, we all pray, wish that in the first attempt you should get through. But I also in the heart of the hearts believe that if you are getting a success for the first time, I'm not generalizing again, one may not know the value of the exam. Because in the last few years, in the last couple of years at least, I see many first-timers getting through. One danger I find there is maybe the silver line of the failure you don't know, the value of the failure you don't know. Sometimes you'll have to fail, but it is not that you would right to fail. It's not that way again. The only thing is when you are failing, you understand that there are some mistakes that I'll have to. So when I'm introducing the topper to you, he had cleared the exam in the very first attempt, but it doesn't mean that he must have started in the month of January, cleared in the month of June, and the next season he is ready. It's not that way. The seasoning happens over a long period of time. There has to be a foundation that goes on for a long period of time. Maybe before that 1 year, the toiling of 2 or 3 years would definitely be there. Only then the whole thing comes up as a success. It's not that in the keyboard you are typing and then immediately you are getting a result. It is not that way. So he would be sharing with you. He would be sharing with you whatever his experience is that must have clicked for him. And what must have clicked for him need not necessarily click for everybody. What he did, he would tell you. What we would do, we would tell you in the class. So generally, in a class, I don't believe that entire 100% would follow what we tell. Some people join the course with a determination that we won't do what is being done in the class. So if you are of that kind, God save you. That's where I leave the dais to the gentleman. You enjoy the afternoon with him. Then tomorrow I would meet you with some more beautiful stories. So I belong to that genre. So I would be coming back with my stories. In your next class, have a good time, sir.